Hey guys, my name's Molly, and my presentation today is about antisocial personality disorder and comparing it to psychopathy and sociopathy. Here is a brief overview of my presentation. So what is antisocial personality disorder? It is a cluster B personality disorder characterized by erratic and dramatic behaviors, and the DSM describes it as a pervasive pattern of disregard for a violation of the rights of others. So here are some common characteristics of ASPD. I'm not going to go over all of them because we did learn them in class, but the big ones are antisocial behaviors. They don't really conform to social norms. They're very impulsive. They don't really have a regard for safety or the law, which is why they are very commonly criminals. And they also had to have conduct disorder in their youth. So they were kids who didn't really follow rules and didn't really have the normal social experiences that most kids do have. So what is sociopathy? Sociopathy is a mental disorder developed from environmental factors characterized by impulsive and aggressive behaviors without feelings of remorse and trouble bonding with others. It commonly leads to illegal activity and arrest, and it is not included in the DSM, which is one of the few distinctions between sociopathy and antisocial personality disorder. So I kind of had a little bit of trouble finding a difference between antisocial personality disorder and sociopathy. Like the majority of my sources use the terms interchangeably. So the main difference is that antisocial personality disorder is in the DSM and it's kind of a diagnostic label, whereas sociopathy is kind of a broad term. So now we're going to focus a little bit on psychopathy. So psychopathy is a mental disorder caused by abnormalities in the brain, and it's characterized by deficiencies in affective processing. So they kind of process the world in a different, alternate way than people without psychopathy process the world, and deficiencies in interpersonal relations. Psychopaths are typically loners. They don't really form bonds with other people, and they only use other people to gain things for themselves. And they also have deficiencies in behavioral dysfunction. This term is not included in the DSM, so it's kind of like sociopathy, where it's kind of like a broad category of a disorder. And that's another difference between psychopathy and antisocial personality disorder. And to diagnose psychopathy, they use the Hare Psychopathy Checklist Revive. So it's just a checklist of criteria for psychopaths. Here's some characteristics of psychopathy versus sociopathy. So the main difference is that psychopathy is genetic. There are brain abnormalities present at birth, whereas sociopathy is developed from environmental factors such as bad parenting. Psychopathy is a more extreme disorder. There's no empathy, guilt, or remorse whatsoever in psychopaths. They are more manipulative and conning, and they're more calculated. Sociopaths have more of a conscience, and they do experience some guilt and empathy. Now we're going to talk about psychopathy versus antisocial personality disorder. So not everyone who has ASPD is a psychopath. About 1/3 of people diagnosed with ASPD meet the criteria for psychopathy. So you can have one of these disorders without having the other. But typically, if you are diagnosed as a psychopath, you're going to be diagnosed with ASPD as well. There are neurocognitive differences between psychopathy and ASPD, and people who have both of these conditions have more severe criminal behaviors. They're just, all of their symptoms are heightened and more extreme. And they have no fear. They have no fear. They have no care about being punished for their actions. They just don't really care. And treatments are not very effective for either of these disorders. There's not really a cure for psychopathy or ASPD, and most of the time, the people with these disorders don't want to be cured. Now we have a case study about Jeffrey Dahmer. I'm sure you've heard of Jeffrey Dahmer. He's an infamous serial killer, and we're including him today because, well, one, it's pretty relevant right now because of the Netflix show that I'm sure you all are watching that just came out. And Jeffrey Dahmer exhibited traits of antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. So basically, he's infamous for murdering at least 17 men and boys and dismembering their bodies, keeping body parts, and even participating in cannibalism. So some traits of antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy that he demonstrated are he was antisocial beginning at a young age. His dad wrote a book about him, and he said he was always kind of a distant kid and he didn't really have many friends. He showed no remorse for his actions once he was brought to trial. And I even saw some videos about other prisoners saying that he would joke about his crimes. He was very callous and manipulative and obviously demonstrated violent and aggressive behaviors. So he meets the criteria for both ASPD and psychopathy. In conclusion, someone can have ASPD and psychopathy, which makes behaviors more extreme, but this is not always the case. Someone can have ASPD without also being a psychopath. ASPD and sociopathy, however, are pretty much interchangeable. The criterion for both disorders is pretty much the same. The only difference is that ASPD is a diagnostic label and included in the DSM, while sociopathy is not. Here are my sources. Thanks for watching.